We're now up to Daf Chavav Amid Beis, and the Gemara is going to point out that there seems to be a contradiction between two statements of Rabbi Elazar. Kasha de Rabbi Elazar ad Rabbi Elazar. Does Rabbi Elazar allow for writing a Tofes Haget Shalol Lishmo without the Tzivei Abba? Because at the beginning of the Mishnah allowed writing a Tofes Haget even Shalol Lishmo. And Shmuel had interpreted that Mishnah was going according to Rabbi Elazar, who holds Eidim Mesira Karsa. But the Tofes is not required Lishma. But the Sefer says explicitly that according to Rabbi Elazar himself, you're not allowed to write Tofes Gittin because we have a Gzera of Tofes Atu Torah. And the Gemara answers, Trei Tanoia, leave it to Rabbi Elazar. We have two different traditions as to what the view of Rabbi Elazar actually is. According to one tradition, Rabbi Elazar, of course, prohibits writing the Torah if I get Shalol Lishma, but yet he's liberal and allows writing the Tofes Shalol Lishma. And he has not accepted the Gzera that Tofes Atu Torah. However, according to the Tana in the Sefer, had a different tradition of what Rabbi Elazar's Shita was. Rabbi Elazar says, we have a Gzera, we're not going to allow you to write the Tofes Shalol Lishma, because you might come to write the Tofes, the Torah, Shalol Lishma. And now we get to Rav Shabsai. Okay. So until now, we said that any kula that would allow a sofer, permit him to write the Tofes without its tzivui, is based on the takana of sofrim. We want to protect the sofrim and allow them to have parnasa so they could have their shtaras and Gittin ready and prepared, ready to go. However, Rav Shabsai, in the name of Chizkiah, has a whole nother pshat as to why the Mishnah made this takana. And they were matir writing the Tofes. Mishum K'tata. What happens here, this is what we call a lesson in Shalom Bayis. The sofer is going to be tempted to prepare a get for this Baal and for this Isha. Why? Because he sees that the marriage is on the rocks. However, the Gemara and Chazal were hoping that maybe there would be a reconciliation between the husband and the wife. And at the end of the day, they'll change their mind and lovey-dovey. And instead of giving a get, they'll decide to continue the marriage. Now, our Mishnah says Rav Shabsai, in the name of Chizkiah, is attributed to Rabbi Meir. So therefore, the ksiva of the get doesn't have to be lishma. Even Motzah get biashpa, we had in the name of Nachman in the previous daf, is kosher. It's all about the chasima. Rabbi Meir hidiyom chasima karsa. Ubedinu de'afilu torif nami lichto. There's no din of yishma. As we said before, you could find the get in the rubbish pail and you could add the signatures and be machshir the get. However, if we allow the sofer to write the get before he got the tzivui Baal, zimnin the shamale, the woman overhears and finds out with sofer the kakosiv that he's writing a get on her husband's name and on her name. And savra iu ka'amale, she comes to the conclusion that her husband gave a mandate to the sofer to write this get. It wasn't that the sofer wrote it on his own initiative. So she thinks that the husband is not really trying to pacify and reconcile this marriage. He already gave the green light to the sofer to write a get. Therefore, Rabbi Meir prohibits writing the names in the get without a tzivui Abba. Now, however, when it comes to Harayat Muteres Chol Adam, that he could write without a tzivui Baal, because Rabbi Meir holds Eidi Chasim Karse, and there's no requirement to Lishma in the writing of the get. So it's just the names that are problematic, because she, the wife, may get wind of the fact that the names of her husband and herself are written in the get by the sofer, and she comes to the conclusion that that's it, the marriage is over. You know, when you think for a moment about the two approaches to these words in the Mishnah, Mitnei Takana, Minakotza lakotza. One is takana for the sake of the sofer, to allow them to write Tovsei Gittin, even without a tzibur. And the other takana is in order to make an attempt to save the marriage. And we're going according to Rabbi Meir. The first approach is according to Rabbi Elazar. And even though we might have prohibited writing the Tofah Shalol Lishma according to Rabbi Elazar, because you might come to write the Torah of Shalol Lishma, but we're going to make an allowance here for the sake of the sofer. And now we're going to the other extreme according to Chizkiah, and we're interpreting the Mishnah in the light of Rabbi Meir, and there's no issue of Lishma in the writing of the get, but the problem is the marriage. Now we have a third approach to explain Mipnei HaTakana. This we indicated already earlier that we're worried about Aguna, but we said it a little differently than the way Rav Chizda is going to say. We said that, in case the Baal is checking out to B'nai Sayam, we want to have her get ready as quickly as possible, otherwise she'll be an Aguna. Rav Chizda takes a different twist on this in the name of Avimi, Mishum Takanas Agunos. So what's Takanas Agunos? Amri according to one approach, Rabbi Meir, Amri Rabbi Los, Amri Rabbi Meir, Diomar Eidech Asima Karsi, Udinu Dafil Torf Nami Lichtov. So according to Rabbi Meir, let him write the whole get from beginning to end, A to Z, Shalol Lishma, without a tzibur, because there's no din of Lishma in the ksiva. However, now the word ma'agen here is a little bit misleading. It doesn't mean classic iguna. Ma'agen here means a divorced woman. Now, what's going to happen here? Let's say there's a ktata, there's some friction in the marriage. The Baal gets all of a sudden very angry at her. She burnt his steak for dinner. So what's he going to do? If the get is already prepared, muchan or mezuman, then zarek le'nila. He's not even going to wait till he cools off. He's going to immediately deliver the get. And she's a grusha without a baal. She has no husband. That's called aguna in this context. So Meir says, don't write the Torah if I get. Maybe by slowing down the process, he will cool off. And he won't immediately, in a rash way, deliver the get. So the takana here, according to one opinion, is within the context of Rabbi Meir. Let the sofer wait for the tzivri abal to slow down the process. And in fact, when I learned this Gemara yesterday, I immediately thought of the Gemara at the end of Masechet Gittin, which is called Get Mekushar. In the case of a Kohen, we really want to slow down the process of his delivering the get because he'll never be able to remarry her. And therefore, we do 10 ksharim and we write the chasimas on each one of the ksharim, a whole takana with a whole ceremony in order to slow down the process of get. And now we have a different view within Rav Chizda, the name of Bibi, about what he means by Mishum Takanas Agunos. And this is reflective of what we said earlier. Rabbi Elazar, the Mishnah reflects the Shita Rabbi Elazar made him see said we need Ksiva Lishma. But dinu dafil tofes namilo lo lichto. Really, we should be afraid that if we allow the sofer to write the Tofah Shalol Lishma, he might come to write the Torah Shalol Lishma. The Zimnin de Boil and Mazel, Lemedina Sayam V'lo Ishkach Safra. We want to speed up the process of preparing the get, the exact opposite of what we said in the first Amri law, within the context of Rabbi Meir. We want to speed up the process of the get. We want to allow, when we shouldn't have allowed, the sofer to prepare the get beforehand without its tzibur, as long as he leaves out the Torah. Why? Because maybe the Baal is going to check out the Medina Sayam, V'lo ashkech safra, he won't find a sofer who has enough time before the boat is leaving to China to write the get. Vishavikla, V'azil, and he leaves her there without a get, goes out to Medina Sayyam, uma'agin imosivlo. She's now without a husband. She doesn't have a get. He's out in Medina Sayyam. Who knows if he'll ever come back? And therefore, the Rabbanu were matir, what normally would have been also according to Abelazar, of a gzera of tofes or tutorev, for the sake of speeding up the process of get. So we have here two extremes again. We have one extreme that we want to slow down the process of the get by telling the sofer, don't write the get until you get to Tzivi Abal, because otherwise, if the get is too accessible and too quickly available, he gets angry at his wife for burning the chicken and he gives her a get. And she's an aguna in that sense. Or a real aguna, according to Abelazar, we should have said tofes or tutorev, but we're going to allow the get to be prepared as far as the tofes without lishmo, without a tzivui. And why? So that in case, in event, he's out to Medina Siyam, he can't find the sofer, he can find a get prepared. Now, the Mishnah says that the sofer has to leave not only the Mokom HaToref, but the Mokom HaZman. Kaposik V'tani. Now, when a Mishnah says something that's unqualified, then that's exactly what it is, unqualified. That's called Kaposik V'tani. Lo Shomin Asu, Lo Shomin Ha'eris. It matters not whether or not this woman whose get is being prepared by the sofer is an Asua, she's already entered into the chuppah, fully married, or an Arusa. So Gemara says the following, Bishleiman in Asuin. I understand well, Min an Asuin, no matter what the reason for Zman is. We have Machlokes, Reish Lakish, and Rabbi Yochanan, back on Daf Yud Zayin, I believe, about why they were masaking Zman and again. Reish Lakish was worried about Peri, and Rabbi Yochanan was worried about Shem Yechapel. Both of those reasonings will apply in the case of Nesuin. That's exactly the Stei Akrav. That's the area of the Machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. So in a case of a Nesua, if he leaves out the Zman, and she's his niece, Pasachos, so he has a special compassion for his wife who's his niece. And therefore, if she had an illegitimate illicit relationship, he will set it up with a get without a Zman, and she'll be able to produce the get and say, well, she had this relationship after the Gerish. Or according to Reish Lakish, Mishum Peri, the Baal eats Peros Nichse Malug until the time of the Gerishin. He's going to continue eating her Peros Nichse Malug after the Gerishin and say that no, the get was much later. So therefore, all our bases are covered in the case of an Asua. Ella, Mina Erisin. Now we're going to get in trouble according to Reish Lakish. Why? According to Rabbi Yochanan, that the reason for the takon of get is Mishum Basachoso, is Ika. In other words, even in the case where a man had Erisin with Basachoso, in event that she has Znus, then he could just give her a get without his man and be Machaper. That the reason for his man is Mishum Peri, Arusa, Miyaslay Peri. The halacha that a Baal eats Peros only applies after Nesuit, because it's Tanai Ksuba. And Tanai Ksuba only go into effect, Nitzei Malug, after Nesuit. So at the point of Erison, there's no Peri de Baal. If there's no Peri de Baal, there's no Nitzei Malug, then he can't sell her Nechasim. He doesn't have rights to her Nechasim. So according to Reish Lakish, why does the Mishnah insist that we got to be very careful about writing the Zman, even in the case of a get min ha-erison? And the Gemara answers, Amrav Amram ha-milsa shamet minei de'ula. I heard the answer to this question from Ula. The Omar, Ula had a whole different consideration here in the case of Zman, mishum takonas vlad. So Rav Amram heard from Ula takonas vlad, but he had no clue what that meant. I was really in the dark as to what he had in mind, because what kind of vlad here? We're talking about an arusa. In the case of an arusa, she did not consummate the marriage. There's no vlad. There's no children here. However, I have begun to understand Ula's Takonas Vlad, after I learned a Bryce. Keva de Shamite Lahad Tanya heard this Bryce, Omer Kisvu get Larusasi. And now we get to the sugya called Pagam Mishpach. Now, what does Pagam Mishpach mean? We know that if a single woman would have a relationship with a man, technically that's not the worst tragedy in the world. But if she gets pregnant, that creates what's called a Pagam Mishpacha, a child that's born out of wedlock. But again, not in a case of an adultery relationship. We're not talking about a mamzer, but nevertheless, it's still considered pogrom. So, for example, again, I don't want to get into politics here, but in the yeshiva world today, the very Haredi world, when it comes to shidduchim, they want to know that this woman's parents are not bali tshuva, because there's always a chashash that maybe this girl was born without a legitimate marriage. They were bali tshuva. Maybe they had civil marriage, and then they did tshuva. And they had a regular Seder Kiddush. Anyway, just leave out all that politics. Anyway, that's called Pgam Mishpach. So that's what the Bryce is talking about now. Ha'omer kisvu get larusasi. The man writes a get for his arusa. Now, which zman is going to be written in the get? L'chora, they're going to write the zman of the ksiva. However, he made a t'nai that he's not divorcing her now. He's going to divorce her later. But the get was written earlier with the zman of the ksiva. L'shechna sena agar shena. Later on, after I marry her, I'm going to give her a get. Now, I was trying to rack my brains, Rabbi, if you could help me with this. Why would a man give a get to a woman and say to her that when I marry you, the get should be chal? Like, why go through the marriage at all? And then he's going to have to pay the ksuba. And I couldn't come up with any, just the balabatish explanation why a man would say such a thing. Maybe he has to fulfill some sort of a pledge to her family. I don't know. He really is not interested in the marriage, but he's got to go through the motions. I don't know. In any event, ain't no get. The Brisa says the get is not valid. The Rabbanan are going to apostle such a get. Why? Because the Zman of the Ksiva is earlier than the Chalos HaGerish. But keep in mind, we're talking about an Arusa. So at least according to Reish Lakish, we would have a problem here. What's the issue of writing the Zman at an earlier date? There's no peri in the case of an Arusa. The Omar Ula. But Ula explains why they wanted to destroy this get, invalidate the get. Matam gzera shemiyomru gita kodim livna. Perhaps they're going to say that the get was given on that date of the ksiva, the earlier date. She went ahead and had a relationship with another man out of wedlock. She was already divorced, so that's okay, except that the Vlad is a pogum. There's some sort of, in the laws of Yuchsin, there's some sort of a detriment in the Yuchsin. So in other words, they're going to assume, the people, that she became pregnant without Nisuin, and that's a pagam in the Mishpach and the reputation of Mishpach. Nami here to in our Mishnah says Rav Amram, based on Ula, that you can't write a get for an Arusa with this man Ksiva, Gzera Shemayomru Gita Kodem Liv. Now the Mishnah says that Rabbi Lazar apostles even Tofsei Gittin that were written Shalol Shma, Gzera Tofes Atu Torf. Amar Rab Zera, Amar Rab Abba Bashil, Amar Rab Una, Saba Amar Rab Adavar, Abba Amar Rab. Like Aseres B'nei, right? Halacha Rabbi Lazar. Now, what does this mean? That we will not allow a sofer to write even the tofes of a get because he might come to write the toref without a tzivi abal. Hori Rav Haled Rabbi Lazar to vino de chachimai. So it seems like all the Amoraim embrace the Shita of Rabbi Lazar that Edi Mesira Karse, and therefore the Ksiva has to be Lishma, and we're not going to allow the Sofa to write even the Tofes without a Tzivi Abba. Now the question is, okay, fine, we have this long tradition to paskin like Rabbi Lazar, but that perhaps is only in Gittin, where the Torah says v'kasav la, the ksiv has to be lishma. We're not going to allow even the tofes shalom lishma. But what about shar shtaros? Let's say we have shtari mamon, for example. So the Gemara asks v'afilu v'shar shtaros nami. Should we assume that even in shar shtaros, we should prohibit writing the shtar shelo lishmo without a tzivui, the tzivui of the mocher or of the lover? And just one second. I'm sorry, I have to make the mathematical calculation here. That what? Oh, now I got it. Sorry. We have a machlokes in our Mishnah between Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, for some reason, right now it's unbeknown to us, passes all shtaros, including shtari mamon, if the tofes was written without the tzivui. We don't know why. But Rabbi Lazar and shar shtaros did not accept a gzera l'gzera, if you remember. And therefore, he didn't say that, well, if we allow in shar shtaros to write the tofes without a tzivui, they'll come to write a get without a tzivui, and then from tofes to Torah, if that's two gzeros. And now, can we accept la halacha the kula of Rabbi Lezer with regard to shar shtaros? Again, in get, he has the gzera that prohibits the tofes or to the Torah. What about in shar shtaros? Can we accept Rabbi Lezer against Rabbi Yehuda and be more permissive, allowing the tofes of shar shtaros to be written shalol lishma? And the Gemara assumes that when this whole Chad Gadya, going back to Rav, Paskin Aloch, Rabbi Lazar, it sounds like we accept Rabbi Lazar both with regard to Gittin, which means he can't write the Tofes Shalol Lishma, and with regard to Shar Shtaros, allowing the Tofes to be written Shalol Lishma without it tzivui. In fact, the Gemara V'amar Apapi Mishmei de Rava Hai Ashata Ashrata. Oh, he writes it Asharta. I know when I was a kid, they said Ashrata. Okay. Asharta, the daini, is the Michtava Mekami Delisad Sada Chasimas Yadai Psu. So we have something called Asharta the daini, which is synonymous with what we call Kiyum Shtaros. Now, let's say, for example, a shtar comes in front of Beis Din and they want to authenticate the signatures on the shtar. They got two witnesses, either the same witnesses signed on the shtar or another two witnesses that recognize their signature and can authenticate it. Says Rav Papi, you're not allowed to have the Dayanim sign and add their chasima to this kiyum shtar before the Eidim actually testify. Why? Alma michsek is shikra. We have a problem of michsek is shikra. The Eidim did not yet testify to verify the signatures, and the Dayanim already wrote that we are affirming and confirming the validity of the shtar. They didn't even hear the Eidim yet. And you and I would say, well, what's the big deal? They're not going to allow the shtar to be given back to the malva or to the lokeach until they get the Eidim to verify. But the Eidim are there. They're standing there right there in Beis Din. No. Michsek shikra. In the eyes of the spectator, it looks like they're lying. They're saying something that's not totally true. Hachinami, here too, when the sofer writes the tofes hashtar, let's say, for example, a shtar milva, the lova has not yet received the money from the malva. And now already the shtar is being written without any tzivui from the lova. If that's the case, that's also Masechet shikra. And therefore, based on Rav Papi's statement with regard to Asharta Dedaini, we have a stira to what Rav Paskin like Rabbi Lazar, that in other shtars you're allowed to write the tofes without a tzivui abal, the lesson. And the Gemara says that no, we're not going to accept Rav Papi. How do we know that we don't accept Rav Papi? Neither Rav Nachman, the Omer Rav Nachman, Omer Hoyer Rav Meir. Afilu mitzo bi ashpa. There's no din of lishma according to Rabbi Meir in the ksivas ashtar, and therefore, as long as you machtim, you put two signatures on l'shem gerushin, the shtar is kosher. Bafilu rabbanon, even though the rabbanon reject Rabbi Meir and they hold that the get in the ashpa is not kosher, lo pligia leid Rabbi Meir lebegite noshim. Their problem, says Rav Nachman, is only in Gittin Noshim where you require Lishma. To be in Ksiva Lishma. Well, the Shtar Shtaras, they don't require Lishma. Lo, they don't disagree with Rabbi Meir. And if you find a Shtar, let's say a Shtar Milva with the right amounts and the right names and the right Zman and the right Mokum and so forth and so on, you can use that Shtar for the sake of the Malva, even though it was not written Lishma. And shtar shemitzo bi'ashpa fit shtar shtaris is kosher, says Rav Nachman. And why aren't you worried about Masechet shikra? Apparently, there's a separate halacha Masechet shikra with regard to asharta dedaini, or maybe we don't even accept Rav Papi with regard to asharta dedaini. And the whole entity of Masechet shikra is not accepted l'halacha. And now we're going to prove that even though the Rabbanan reject Rabbi Meir in Matzah Ba'ashpa in Gittin, but they accept the validity of Shar Shtaris in Matzah Ba'ashpa. The Omer of Asi, Omer of Yochanan, Shtar Shalovabo Pro, Eino Choser Velovabo, Shekvar Nimchal Shibudo. We're going to have a whole diuk here on the statement of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says that if the Lova paid back the Chov, and on that very same day, he came back to the Malva and he needs to extend, to borrow another money, he can't use the same shtar. It's Nimchal Shibudo. That means the Shibud and the Karka, the Lova, was already Nimchal because he paid up the Chol. And now you have to write a new shtar to create a new kinyan of Shibud on the Nichsei Halova. So the Gemara's Medayik, time of the Nimchal Shibudo, the only reason why this shtar is possible if he wants to use it again is because of Nimchal Shibuda, because every shtar milvek generates a shibud on the karka of the lover, and this would be an illegitimate shibud because he already paid up that chov, and therefore the shibud is gone. How could he now borrow money and create a new shibud with the same old shtar? But if there was no problem of Nimchal Shibudo, let's say for example, they would write explicitly that there's no shibud karka in the shtar, then it would be a valid shtar. And mishum shikra lo chayshina, that the Masechet shikra is not an element over here. So we see clearly that we could paskin like Rabbi Lazar, even though he was machshir the tofes of shar shtaros without a tzivui, and we're not worried about Masechet shikra because we never accepted the halacha of Masechet shikra, and this leads us to the Mishnah on Daf Chav Zayin. So let me take this opportunity. Thank you, and Shavua Tov.